Hey everyone, Daniel and Chris here from IGN. Now we're going to look at the first trailer for season 2 of Daredevil very closely here, and a lot of it is centered on the Punisher. Right away we see the first shot is of the Castle family residence. Of course, this is, I assume, Frank Castle's house, whose real name is Frank Castiglione, which is Italian in origin.
And here we see a picture of Frank with his daughter in much happier times on her birthday. In the source material, Frank has a wife, Maria, and 2 children, a daughter named Lisa and a son named Frank. Maybe they got rid of the son and this is just Lisa we're looking at. Do you think Frank Jr. has been written out of history?
I was wondering maybe they just want to trim it down and make it simpler, just having one. No, he gets the point. It's all equally sad.
Yeah.
But maybe they just want to keep it a little bit, make it simpler.
Yeah, all we're saying is a kid does die.
Yeah, I think we can say with degree of certainty something bad's happened to Frank. And I was kind of looking at this footage and wondering, who is this going through the family home at night by torchlight? Is it Frank returning home? Or is it, the people who killed Frank's family? Do they kill them in the house? That kind of departs from the origin story in the comics, where they're executed in Central Park. But it could look like maybe the hit takes place at his house.
Yep, and we've got this book, One Batch, Two Batch, a fictional children's book. Maybe it's something that Frank used to read to his daughter. And we hear Frank repeat the lines from the books as he guns down mobsters. So could this be like a repeating motif in the show?
Yeah, I hope he didn't read it to his daughter in quite a similar fashion. It does look a good book. It's about 2 birds presumably baking cookies together.
Yeah, they look like having a right laugh. I hope he hasn't got his gun to her head while he reads it to her.
Next shot is Frank at this merry-go-round. Now later in the trailer we kind of realise that Frank is here to kind of ambush some dudes, but also I was speculating, is this somewhere that maybe Frank came with his daughter, or is this where the execution of his family took place?
Yeah,
perhaps?
It looks like he's sitting there and kind of remembering or thinking back. So I wonder though, although it did make me think, if the execution does take place on the merry-go-round, that is the beginning of Face Off. It actually is.
It is. I don't know if they want to tap into the mythology of Face Off. It's quite a rich mythology. Yeah, because in the source material, Frank is with his family and they witness a kind of gangland execution in Central Park, and the mobsters don't want to leave any witnesses, and his family's caught in the crossfire.
Yeah.
This could be that location, perhaps.
And then we move on to images of the cross. So Matt's obviously still feeling guilty. That guilt has not passed from season 1. There's Father Lantern, played by Peter McRobbie. Obviously, Matt visited him a few times in the first season for confession. The odd discussion about God, and he had lattes, didn't he?
Yeah, it's like he's kind of like priest/barista, which I think you need to do in New York to survive. You need to diversify. And the next shot is kind of these... Is someone picking up bullets? And so far we've seen Punisher looking into a trunk full of kind of crude shotguns, but this looks kind of more high-end military weaponry, these kind of flight cases. It looks sort of like the suit is completely black, but that could be lighting. But I think you're reading too much to think it's anyone but Daredevil investigating.
Yep. And then we see a couple of crime scenes that the Punisher is responsible for. And this chimes in with what we know about the first few episodes already. He's introduced in a way that makes him feel very much like the villain, or at least the antagonist of season 2. Do you think that'll be the case, though, or do you think that's something they're just setting up, that there's more to it?
I wonder if it is a misdirect, because we know there's other stuff in this season. At the end, we see Elektra, who could be another antagonist. And, of course, the kind of gaping presence in this trailer is Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, who was the villain for the entire first season. He was set up as the antagonist to Matt in the first season, in the way they're doing with Frank Castle. And one of the things that I think was universally celebrated about the first season was the Kingpin. So it'd be ludicrous to not include him in the second season.
But that said, he got arrested, so maybe he's just still in prison.
You still have to think he would influence people. But again, probably in prison for the majority of the season, I imagine.
Yep, agreed.
What they've said about Berthnall's Punisher is that he's a little bit like the Terminator. Mm-hmm. And the stuff he does in the first couple of episodes, which I imagine a lot of this footage is taken from those early episodes, he does stuff that you might not, some members of the audience might never ever be able to get back on side with him. Like, he goes to some really dark places. Yeah,
we talked about this on the superhero show that we did about what we want from the Punisher in season 2. And this is a quote we used there, and one we'll say again now that Berthnall himself said, he said, you can lose the audience by episode 2, I love that because my goal and the team's goal is to win them back and explain it and fill in the blanks. And whether you can get behind him or not, you'll understand him. So it's going to go some pretty dark places.
Yeah, I like this next shot. It looks like the Punisher's work table. There's handguns, there's homemade grenades, there's lots of stuff going on here.
Yeah, and in Punisher Warzone, I believe the number was there was more than 120 guns used in that. I feel like in that one, Ray Stevenson threw away, each time he used a gun, he just threw it away.
Do you know that you can reload these?
Doesn't care. So in this one, I think there could even be more. Like there's a huge amount of artillery you see in this trailer. And I love that line, Hell's Kitchen's about to explode.
Yeah, it's a real firebox. So the next is like the first good shot of the Punisher, and he's like streaked with blood. So it's obviously something pretty horrible's gone on. I also like the fact that for a lot of this trailer, he's just in very civilian clothing. Like he would totally blend in New York. He doesn't really stand out. He's got jeans, he's got a jacket on, and there's no skull that we can see on his chest or anything like that.
Yeah, for Warzone, again, Lexi Alexander, the director of that, I heard an interview with her where she didn't really want to use the skull. She thought she was trying to ground it in some level of reality, and she thought it was just a bit silly, a bloke running around with a skull on his chest.
He do stand out a bit.
So they came to a compromise where it was kind of a faded version of it, and I wonder if we will see it on him in this show or not. I mean, you'd for fan service, you'd expect it by the end for there to be some kind of...
In a similar way to the first season of Daredevil, So Long didn't give you the horn suit, and then it does at the end, but...
Yeah.
I think they'll have to do a more... I don't think it's going to be as simple as him suiting up or anything like that.
No, agreed. Next up, we get a shot of the Punisher sniping Beg. So kind of harking back to Castle, who was a decorated soldier and a Marine who served in Vietnam. Do you think they'll update that to something that he's a more recent conflict he served in?
Yeah, I think it'll be updated to probably the most recent Gulf War, to Iraq or something like that. To just it has to be updated, I think.
And you would think there'll be an element of PTSD here or something like that.
Yeah, and there's this, obviously he's had tragedy since he's got back home, more recent tragedy, but Berthnall really has that really detached, vacant look in his eyes. He looks like a traumatized man in this trailer.
Definitely.
And this is an interesting line next where it says, maybe we created him, all of us. And this is Karen talking to Matt, and she talks about Daredevil creating him. Now, when we left them, Karen doesn't know Matt is Daredevil. And there's one way you can interpret this bit of dialogue that she knows, and they're talking about how Daredevil, in the same way that Batman does at the end of Batman Begins, he's escalated the situation. Whereas when he gets in a suit and starts going around beating up people, he invites others to do similar excessive acts. Or she's just talking about Daredevil in general. The people in Hell's Kitchen kind of celebrating him as a hero has kind of led to this escalation.
I mean, her knowing only works if they all talk about Daredevil in the third person, because if she did know you, she would kind of say, well, you've created him. So I don't know, we'll have to find out. I'd be surprised if she finds out the secret identity in this series, but...
Yeah, and also because Marvel doesn't really have a lot of secret identities in its universe, it'd be quite weak, I think, just to get rid of the few ones that you have. This next shot is this X-ray. So even though we're not seeing the skull symbol on the chest, this kind of gives us something resembling that.
Yeah, explain this to me, Dan. I was confused by this.
So why is she looking at an X-ray? Presumably that is Frank Castle, because the Punisher symbol is related to him, obviously. And I was wondering, what if she is researching who Frank Castle is, and she's the only thing she can find on him is a medical record with this X-ray in it? Because if he is a soldier, if he's Black Ops, maybe he doesn't have a public record. So this is the closest she has to an image of him. So for a long time, it might be that thing where they're passing Frank Castle on the street and not knowing who he is. All they have is like this medical record, which actually doesn't have a picture of him in it. It's a theory, Chris.
It's a theory.
It's a theory. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, but why is there an X-ray in the shape of a skull?
Well, it's an X-ray of his head.
Yeah, it just. All right, moving on. So there's a glimpse that maybe there's a chance that Matt and Karen get together in this series. Is that something you want to see?
I think so. I think they have to pursue that, especially if you're bringing in Elektra to kind of introduce a triangle. I think it makes sense for Matt and Karen to get together. Obviously, it's in the source material as well, and that's setting up a potentially very dark storyline.
Yeah, things won't go well. And then we've got Punisher looking down, sniping into the parking lot that we saw earlier. Any idea who it is he's targeting?
No, but I thought it was interesting when he looks down and you see this guy in this car. He's wearing what looks like a hospital gown.
Yeah.
So I was wondering whether it's someone he injured
Yep.
and survived, and this is kind of to illustrate that he'll never stop.
Yep.
He won't stop until you're down.
And so here we see Rosario Dawson back as Claire Temple. Now we know from things that people who've made the show have said that she doesn't have a sizable role in this series, as she's going to play a more prominent role in Luke Cage, which she's shooting at the moment. So I wonder if she'll just be dropped in into the odd episode like she did in Jessica Jones.
So in the next scene, kind of this whole way, we see more of the new Daredevil suit.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually 2 new Daredevil suits in this trailer, or at least masks or cowls or whatever you want to call them. So at the end of the last series, when he got the suit made by Melvin Potter, Gladiator, it was like a really big helmet. In the new series, it's much tighter to the face, more streamlined. It looks like the horns might be slightly bigger. And there's also a kind of black suit with more black on the mask. And I was wondering if this is maybe a little bit more like the new Marvel comic, which has a more kind of black and red suit.
Do you think Melvin Potter will return in this one? Because they did seem to spend a fair bit of time setting him up in season 1.
Well, yeah, I think he might do, because it looks like there's a change in the suit. But then later on in the trailer, we see that the mask is broken, and it almost looks like it's been crudely fused back together. So I wonder if that's Matt fixing it rather than Melvin for some reason.
And then we've got Daredevil and Punisher discussing their ideological differences. Punisher says, "I hit people and they stay down," and that's obviously going to be a big theme that's going through it. Yeah. Where sort of Daredevil's all about the rule of law. Yeah. Respecting that, and Punisher's all about just taking people out. Yeah,
it seems like they have a big discussion before they actually fight, and they realise probably their differences are irresolvable.
Yeah.
So here is Punisher shooting out this window, and if you kind of extrapolate that image, it could possibly be shooting the skull symbol, I think. It looks like it resembles that.
And then we're back at the merry-go-round. So that early shot, was that Frank waiting for targets to show up?
I think
for him
so,
to kill?
yeah. And it looks like he's only got a handgun. He's taking down these 4 guys pretty easily.
And then we hear him saying, "I think you're a coward," to Daredevil, which are pretty big words, aren't they? And you would think that will precipitate the big face-off that they'll have against each other.
Everything we know about Matt from the first season, that's really pressing his buttons. Because the first season, he was battling with, what was he doing? Was it right? Was it enough? Was it too much?
Yeah.
So it's just call him a coward after everything he's been through. So this line, "you're one bad day away from being me," is actually something the showrunner of the first season, Stephen DeKnight, said about Matt Murdock in the run-up to the series coming out, that he's one bad day away from becoming the Punisher.
That's pretty cool. And then the big moment at the end of the trailer, and that's Elodie Young being introduced as Elektra. The first proper good look we get at her. So she's the daughter of a Greek ambassador. She was referenced in season 1 as someone Matt dated and took Spanish classes with. But considering his first reaction is to grab a kitchen knife, you would think that there was more going on between the two of them in the run-up to this.
Yeah, because like with Matt's heightened senses, he knows who... I would think he knows exactly who that is as soon as he gets into the kitchen from all his heightened senses. So why is that his first reaction?
Yeah.
She's a dangerous person.
Don't you have that with any exes?
Actually, now you mention it.
And we know she also fought alongside Stick, Matt's trainer. So
I imagine that to be the latter half of the season. I think the first half is Punisher centered, but the stuff to do with the stick and the hand, which was established in some way in the first season, I think that's going to become a bigger part of the season. And
in the same way, at the end of kind of the Dawn of Justice trailer, we got the money shot of kind of the Holy Trinity going into battle together. Do you think that this is building up to the 3 of them going into battle together?
If so, that's probably the most uneasy alliance that we've ever had in the Marvel Universe, which makes it entirely appropriate for Netflix, I think.
Yep. Agreed. And then we're told that the next trailer will be dropping on the 25th of February, so maybe we'll get some Kingpin action there. I don't know. Either way, Daredevil Season 2 is back on Netflix March 18th, 2016.